Mike Tyson's fist is clenched so tight, his knuckles have gone white. He's staring at a man he hasn't seen in 34 years. A man who weighs maybe 120 pounds now, shaking, homeless, reeking of cheap vodka and unwashed clothes. The man's face is skeletal, eyes sunken, but Tyson recognizes him immediately. Donnie Long, the bully who made 10-year-old Mike Tyson feel powerless. The man who ripped the head off his beloved pigeon just to watch him cry. Tyson's breathing is heavy. His trainer, who's standing 15 feet back, doesn't move. Nobody moves, because everyone in this Brooklyn alley knows what Mike Tyson can do with that fist. But 10 seconds earlier, none of them knew this confrontation was about to happen at all. It's April 2010. Mike Tyson is 43 years old, bankrupt, broken, trying to rebuild a life that's collapsed more times than his opponents ever did. He's in Brownsville, Brooklyn, the neighborhood that forged him and nearly destroyed him. He's here filming a documentary, revisiting the streets where he learned to fight because he had no other choice. The crew is packing up equipment near the Betsy Head pool when his childhood friend Jay Bright leans in and whispers 6 words that stop Tyson's heart. Donnie Long is right over there. Tyson doesn't ask where. He doesn't need to. 34 years of rage have been waiting for this moment, coiled in his DNA like a viper ready to strike. He turns his head slowly, following Jay's subtle nod toward an alley between 2 abandoned buildings. And there he is, Donnie Long. The monster from his nightmares, now reduced to a shivering ghost begging for change outside a bodega. But to understand why this moment is about to shatter both men, you need to go back to 1976. Back to when Mike Tyson was a 190-pound 10-year-old with a lisp so severe other kids called him Little Fairy Boy. Back when the only thing in the world that loved him unconditionally was a pigeon. Not just any pigeon. A racing bird with grey and white feathers that Mike had rescued from a rooftop coop. He named it Julius, after Julius Erving, because the bird could fly higher than any other. Mike would spend hours on that Brownsville rooftop, letting Julius perch on his shoulder, feeding it seeds he'd stolen from corner stores, whispering secrets he couldn't tell anyone else. That pigeon didn't care that Mike was fat, didn't care that he stuttered, didn't care that his mother was a prostitute and his father was gone. Julius just sat there, cooing softly, making Mike feel like maybe he mattered. Donnie Long was 17, a predator who ruled Brownsville through fear. A kid who'd already done time in juvenile detention for assault but came back meaner, hungrier for power. He'd been watching Mike for weeks, and he understood something crucial. If you want to really hurt someone, you don't go for their body, you go for the thing they love. One summer afternoon, Donnie climbed up to Mike's rooftop with 3 other teenagers. Mike was there, letting Julius eat from his palm, when he heard the footsteps. He turned and saw Donnie's smile, the kind of smile that has nothing to do with joy and everything to do with cruelty. Mike tried to grab Julius, tried to run, but Donnie was faster. He snatched the pigeon out of the air mid-flight, held it up by its wings while Mike screamed, and then in one vicious motion twisted the bird's head clean off its body. The sound is what Mike remembers most. Not a crack, like in the movies. More like a wet tearing. The head hit the rooftop with a soft thud. The body convulsed in Donnie's hand, wings flapping frantically in death spasms, blood spraying across Mike's face. Donnie threw the corpse at Mike's feet and laughed. "What you gonna do, little fairy boy? Cry?" "Yeah, that's what I thought." Mike Tyson did cry. He collapsed on that rooftop, covered in his best friend's blood, and sobbed until he vomited. But something else happened in that moment. Something that would eventually turn him into the most feared heavyweight champion in history. The tears stopped, and behind his eyes, something dark and ancient woke up. A voice that whispered, "Never again. Never feel this powerless again. Become so strong that nobody can ever hurt you like this." Within 2 years, Mike Tyson had transformed his body into a weapon. He found D'Amato, the legendary trainer who saw the rage in Mike's eyes and decided to weaponize it. By 12, Mike could knock out grown men. By 14, he was destroying amateur opponents with a violence that scared even his own trainers. And every single time he stepped into a ring, he wasn't fighting his opponent, he was fighting Donnie Long. Every jab was revenge. Every uppercut was justice. Every knockout was the sound of a pigeon's neck snapping in reverse. But here's what nobody understood. Not even Cosses. Mike Tyson never wanted to be a fighter. He wanted to be a pigeon trainer. He wanted to raise birds and live quietly and never hurt anyone. Donnie Long took that dream and murdered it in front of him. So Mike became the thing he feared most. He became Donnie. Now in this Brooklyn alley in 2010, those 2 versions of Mike Tyson are colliding. The 43-year-old man who's lost everything, his titles, his money, his marriages, his dignity, and the 10-year-old boy who's still holding a headless pigeon and screaming for someone to make it stop. Tyson starts walking toward Donnie Long. His trainer calls out, "Mike, don't," but Tyson doesn't hear him. The documentary crew scrambles to follow, cameras rolling, sensing they're about to capture something nobody was supposed to see. Every step toward Donnie feels like wading through concrete. Tyson's heart is slamming against his ribs. His mind is playing two movies at once, the rooftop in 1976 and this alley in 2010, blood on his face. Julius's head on the ground, Donnie's laugh. Donnie sees him coming, and for the first time in 34 years their eyes meet. Donnie's face goes grey. He knows exactly who this is. He knows what he did, and he knows what Mike Tyson is capable of. Donnie tries to back up, but his legs are too weak, too destroyed by years of alcohol and street life. He stumbles against a brick wall, trapped. Tyson stops 3 feet away, close enough to smell the decay, close enough to see that Donnie Long, the monster who haunted his childhood, is now just a dying man who weighs less than Mike did when he was 10. The silence in that alley is suffocating. Tyson's fist is still clenched. Donnie's lips are trembling, and then Donnie does something that surprises everyone, including himself. He starts to cry, not the fake tears of a manipulator trying to save his own skin. Real tears, the kind that come from a place so deep you didn't even know it existed. And through those tears, Donnie Long whispers 5 words that will change both of their lives. "I'm sorry." Tyson's fist doesn't move, but his face does. The rage that's been carved into his features for 3 decades starts to crack. Jealous. Tyson's voice is barely audible, a rumble from deep in his chest. Jealous of what? Donnie wipes his face with a filthy sleeve, his whole body shaking. "You had something that loved you, man. That bird. I saw how you looked at it, like it was the only good thing in the world. I never had that. Nobody ever loved me like that. Not my parents. Not nobody. I was born a mistake, and every day people reminded me. So when I saw you with that pigeon, saw how much you cared." His voice breaks. "I couldn't stand it. If I couldn't have it, you shouldn't either. So I killed it. I killed the only good thing either of us had." It's the most honest thing Donnie Long has ever said in his life. And Mike Tyson knows it, because he's spent 34 years doing the exact same thing, destroying the things he loved because he believed he didn't deserve them, sabotaging his marriages, pushing away his children, burning through $300 million because some broken part of him believed that happiness was something other people got to keep, not him. But that was only the beginning of what Tyson was about to understand. He looks at Donnie Long, really looks at him, and sees something he never expected to see. He sees himself, not the champion version, not the icon. He sees the scared kid underneath all that rage. The kid who hurt people because he was hurting. The kid who destroyed beautiful things because he'd never been taught how to protect them. Tyson's fist slowly unclenches. His hand drops to his side, and when he speaks again, his voice isn't the snarl of Iron Mike. It's the soft, wounded sound of Little Mike. The kid with the lisp who just wanted his pigeon back. "You made me who I am, Donnie." Donnie looks up, confused, terrified, waiting for the punchline that ends with his skull against the pavement. But Tyson continues, and his next words are so quiet the documentary cameras have to be turned up in post-production just to catch them. "I hated you so much. I wanted to become strong enough to kill you. I dreamed about it, every night for years. I'd imagine finding you and beating you until you begged me to stop, and then I'd keep going, because that's what you taught me. That's what I became." Tyson's eyes are wet now, glistening in the dim alley light. "But you know what? That hate almost killed me instead. It turned me into something I despise. I hurt people who didn't deserve it. I scared my own kids. I became you, Donnie. I became the bully." Donnie is fully sobbing now, his skeletal frame shaking against the brick wall. "I destroyed your life, man. I know I did. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." And this is the moment that separates Mike Tyson from every other fighter who ever learned violence as a survival language. The moment where he has a choice. He can do what every cell in his body has been programmed to do for 34 years. He can unleash that rage. He can make Donnie Long feel every ounce of pain that 10-year-old Mike felt on that rooftop. One punch, that's all it would take. Or he can do something harder, something that requires a kind of strength he's never used before. Mike Tyson takes a deep breath. He closes his eyes, and in the darkness behind his eyelids, he sees Julius, not dead, not bloodied. He sees the bird on his shoulder, cooing softly, head tilted, those black eyes looking at him with pure trust. And he hears his own voice, the voice of 10-year-old Mike, whispering, "It's okay, Julius. I got you. You're safe." That's what breaks him. Tyson opens his eyes and does the impossible. He reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out his wallet. Donnie flinches, thinking it's a weapon, but Tyson pulls out every bill inside. About $400, and holds it out. Take it. Donnie stares at the money like it's a hallucination. What? Take it, Tyson repeats. Get something to eat. Get a room tonight. Get clean for a few days. Donnie's hands are shaking so badly he can barely hold the bills. Why? Why would you? After what I did? Tyson cuts him off. Because I forgive you, Donnie. The words come out strangled, like they're being ripped from somewhere deep in his chest. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I need to. Because if I don't let this go, it's gonna kill me the same way it's killing you. I've been carrying you around for 34 years. I'm tired, man. I'm so fucking tired. Donnie Long collapses, just drops to his knees in the alley, clutching the money to his chest, weeping like a child. And Mike Tyson, the baddest man on the planet, the guy who bit off Evander Holyfield's ear, the fighter who once said his goal was to drive his opponent's nosebone into his brain, stands there watching him cry, and he's crying too. The documentary crew is frozen. Nobody expected this. They came to film a tough guy revisiting his old neighborhood. Instead, they're witnessing something almost biblical, a resurrection, not of Donnie Long necessarily, but of the part of Mike Tyson that died on that rooftop in 1976. Tyson reaches down and helps Donnie to his feet. They stand there for a moment, face to face, two broken men who destroyed each other in different ways. And then Tyson does something even more shocking. He pulls Donnie into a hug. It's awkward. Donnie's body is so frail. Mike is afraid he might break him, but he holds him anyway. And Donnie holds back, his skeletal arms barely able to reach around Tyson's massive frame. When they finally separate, Tyson says one more thing. Get help, Donnie. Really get help, because you're still alive. That means something. Don't waste it. Donnie nods, unable to speak. He backs away slowly, still clutching the money, still crying, and disappears into the Brownsville streets. Tyson watches him go. His trainer approaches cautiously. You okay, champ? Tyson wipes his eyes with the back of his hand. I don't know, but I feel lighter, like I just put down something heavy I've been carrying my whole life. The documentary footage of this encounter was never supposed to be released. It was too raw, too private, but Tyson approved it years later for his one-man show on Broadway, because he wanted people to understand something crucial. Forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about freeing yourself from the prison you've been living in. But the story doesn't end there. 2 months after that alley encounter, Mike Tyson gets a phone call from a Brooklyn hospital. Donnie Long is dying. Liver failure, kidney failure, a body that's been poisoned for decades, finally shutting down. He's asking for Mike. Tyson doesn't hesitate. He gets in his car and drives straight there. When he walks into the hospital room, Donnie is barely conscious, hooked up to machines, his skin a sickly yellow from jaundice. But when he sees Mike, his eyes focus. Mike pulls a chair next to the bed and sits down. Donnie's voice is a whisper. You came. Of course I came. Donnie's bony hand reaches out, and Mike takes it. I used your money, Donnie rasps. Got clean for 3 weeks, best 3 weeks I had in 20 years. Felt human again. Thank you. Tyson's throat is tight. You could have stayed clean, man. Donnie's laugh is bitter and wet. Nah, too far gone. But I needed to tell you something before I go. That day in the alley, when you forgave me, that was the first time in my entire life anyone ever showed me mercy. My dad beat me every day. My mum left when I was 6. I was a mistake everyone wanted to erase. So I became what they told me I was, a piece of shit. But you, Donnie's grip tightens. You didn't have to forgive me. I didn't deserve it, but you did it anyway. And for 3 weeks, I got to feel like maybe I wasn't completely evil. Maybe I was just broken. And broken things can be fixed, you know? Mike Tyson is crying openly now. You weren't evil, Donnie. You were hurt. We were both hurt. Donnie's breathing is labored. Do me a favor. Anything. When you tell people about me, don't just tell them about the pigeon. Tell them about this. Tell them I was sorry. Tell them I tried to be better. Even if it was just for 3 weeks. Tell them I mattered. But you mattered, Donnie. You matter right now. Donnie Long smiles. It's the first genuine smile Mike has ever seen on his face. And then he closes his eyes. The machines start beeping. Nurses rush in. Mike is ushered out. Donnie dies 17 minutes later. At the funeral, which Mike pays for entirely, only 4 people show up. Mike, his trainer, a hospital chaplain, and a social worker. No family, no friends. Just a cheap casket and a grave in a Brooklyn cemetery. Mike stands over the casket before they lower it and says something nobody else can hear. Later, when asked what he said, Mike admits, I told him I'd keep my promise. I'd tell his story, because his story is my story. We were both kids who got broken by people who were supposed to protect us. The only difference is, I learned to fight, and he didn't. But that could have easily been me in that casket. It almost was so many times. Here's what Mike Tyson never tells people, but his close friends know. After Donnie died, Mike started a foundation. Not a boxing foundation, a pigeon rescue and rehabilitation program for at-risk kids in Brownsville. He teaches them how to raise birds, how to care for something vulnerable, how to find peace in the simple act of watching something beautiful fly. He never names the foundation after himself. He names it Julius, after the pigeon Donnie killed, after the dream that died on a rooftop in 1976. And every kid who comes through that program learns two things. First, how to raise pigeons. Second, the story of Donnie Long. Not as a cautionary tale, not as a villain, but as a human being who made terrible choices, caused real damage, and still at the very end tried to be better. Mike tells them, Donnie took something from me I can never get back. But if I'd killed him in that alley, I would have lost something even more important. I would have lost myself completely. Forgiveness didn't erase what he did. It freed me from what it turned me into. There's a plaque at the foundation. It's small, easy to miss, if you don't know to look for it. It reads, "In memory of Julius, the pigeon who taught a boy to love, and Donnie Long, the man who taught that boy to forgive." Mike Tyson visits the foundation twice a month. He sits with kids who remind him of himself, angry, hurt, convinced the world is their enemy, and he shows them his hands. These massive, scarred weapons that have destroyed so many people, and he says, these hands could have killed the man who hurt me most, but the strongest thing I ever did with them was help him stand up instead. One of the kids once asked him, "Do you really forgive him? Like, really?" Mike thought about it for a long time. Then he said, "Some days, yeah. Some days I still see that pigeon's head on the rooftop, and I want to go back and break Donnie in half. But most days, I realize forgiving him was the only way to stop being him, because carrying that hate around, that was just another way of letting him kill something I loved. Except this time, it was me he was killing, and I decided I'd rather live." The kid nodded. "Did forgiving him bring your pigeon back?" Mike smiled, sad but real. "No, but it brought me back, and I guess that's something." In 2020, during a podcast interview, Mike Tyson was asked about the biggest fight of his life. People expected him to say Evander Holyfield, or Lennox Lewis, or Buster Douglas. Instead, he said, "Donnie Long. Not the fight in the alley. I didn't fight him there. The real fight was the one inside me. The fight between the man I became because of him, and the man I could have been if I'd never met him. Took me 40 years to figure out I didn't have to choose. I could be both, the fighter and the pigeon trainer, the monster and the man. It's all me." He paused, staring at nothing, or maybe at everything. "Donnie's been dead for 10 years now, but I think about him all the time. Not with hate anymore, just sadness, for both of us. Two kids from Brownsville who got chewed up by the streets and spit out as monsters. The only difference is, I got customato. I got people who saw something in me worth saving. Donnie never got that, so yeah, I forgive him, because someone forgave me, and that's the only reason I'm still here." The interviewer asked one final question. "If you could go back to that rooftop in 1976, knowing everything you know now, what would you tell 10-year-old Mike?" Tyson's eyes filled with tears. "I'd tell him to hold on to that pigeon as tight as he can, because losing it is going to hurt worse than anything. But surviving that hurt, that's going to make him human. And being human is harder than being a champion. But it's also the only thing worth being." Mike Tyson is 58 years old now. He still raises pigeons. He still fights, just not in the ring. And every time he releases a bird into the Brooklyn sky, he thinks about two things. Julius, the pigeon who loved him when nobody else did, and Donnie Long, the man who taught him that the strongest thing you can do isn't destroying your enemy, it's refusing to become them. That's the fight Mike Tyson finally won, and it's the only one that ever really mattered. If you want to see the raw documentary footage of that alley confrontation, it exists. Tyson released segments of it in his 2012 one-man show Undisputed Truth on Broadway. The full encounter has never been shown publicly, but pieces of it live in archives. Mike standing face to face with Donnie, both men crying, the hug that nobody expected. It's uncomfortable to watch, because forgiveness, real forgiveness, doesn't look cinematic. It looks messy and painful and human. The Julius Foundation still operates in Brownsville. If you search for it, you'll find photos of kids on rooftops, holding pigeons, smiling in a way that Mike Tyson once smiled before the world taught him not to. The foundation doesn't advertise, doesn't seek publicity, it just exists, quietly doing the work that Donnie Long's cruelty and Mike Tyson's forgiveness made possible. There's something worth sitting with here. Not a lesson, not a moral, just a question. What are you carrying that's been dead for decades? What hate are you holding on to? Because letting it go feels like betraying the person you were when you got hurt. Mike Tyson carried a headless pigeon for 34 years, and when he finally put it down, he discovered something unexpected. The weight he'd been blaming on Donnie Long, most of it was his own hands, clenched into fists, refusing to open. This isn't a story about a boxer. It's a story about two kids from Brownsville who became each other's ghost. One learned to fight, the other learned to destroy. And decades later, in a Brooklyn alley that smelled like garbage and regret, they both learned something harder: how to let go.